Hi, my name is Rachel. The topic of my paper is the art of realism in architectural representation. I will be discussing how architectural representation has developed from historical representation to modern renderings and how drawings themselves have changed in their uses. To begin, I'm introducing Brunelleschi's adoption of the drawn perspective. In a famous noted experiment, Brunelleschi used mirrors to sketch the Florence Baptistery in perfect perspective. He was able to mathematically calculate the scale of objects with a painting in order to make them appear realistic. Here's an example of one of his drawings. It was a sketch of a linear perspective. It's an example of a hand-drawn architectural representation that shows depth with shading and perspective. Another example of a hand-drawn rendering is Boulet's Centigraph for Isaac Newton. Boulet argued that in order to execute, it is first necessary to conceive. The centigraph dedicated to Isaac Newton was brought to life by Boulet's many renderings. What makes this rendering realistic is the use of shading and the sky as context. This is an example of another hand-drawn representation of the Robie House by Frank Lloyd Wright. It's an ink-drawn representation of a perspective and a plan. The details included in the drawing help the viewer visualize the building. Another example by Frank Lloyd Wright is his drawing of falling water. His use of color and natural context help render the image. Frank Lloyd Wright said that color has a tremendous influence on our moods and cannot be too carefully considered. This example is of a rendering done by Saarinen for the Parliament House in Helsinki. This architectural drawing uses ink, gouache, and watercolor. The different use of mediums add to an atmospheric quality of this representation. This is another example by Saarinen, done in 1922. It was a hand-drawn rendering for the Tribune Tower competition. The use of shading adds detail and dimension through the drawing. In the 1970s to 1980s, architecture experienced a change towards representation. Rather than buildings being the end goal, architectural drawings themselves became the result produced. This shift was due to the recession in the 70s, since architects were not building as much, a change in how the architectural design process was used, and thirdly, the rise of architectural publications. In the late 1970s, architectural drawings began to be recognized and collected to constitute a history of architecture. Some examples of institutions during the time were the Canadian Centre for Architecture, the Dutchess Architectural Museum, and the Getty Center. A gallery that was prominent during this time was the Castelli Gallery. These exhibitions represent the first time architectural representations were shown at a gallery. These shows were crucial to changing perception of contemporary architectural drawing. Another gallery was the Max Protech Gallery. His shows led to architectural drawings, whether process, presentation, or visionary drawings, being perceived as art, even though that was not his intention. These other galleries instigated a blurring of boundaries between art, architecture, and representation that produced changes in perception of architectural drawing as aesthetic works of art removed from the process of architectural design. In the 1990s, however, the market surrounding architectural drawings with exhibitions became less frequent due to the introduction of computers and the resurgence of the economy for building again. Architectural drawings reverted back to representational methods of architectural design to become buildings. The introduction of computer-aided design and new media changed architectural representation again. New tools such as Photoshop, Illustrator, along with 3D modeling software and rendering programs created new mediums for architectural drawings. The use of tools that are common in cinema, photography, and video games started to aid architectural rendering. Some visualization techniques have moved architectural representation into the realm of hyperrealism. The collage is a new method of representation created by the opportunities of new technological tools. The principle of this technique was an image composed of cut-out pieces of different origins, all combined to create a photo montage. An example of an architectural visualizer firm is Mir. One of the founders, Trond Grieve Andersen, says, "The food industry uses the term terror to explain food that expresses its origin and uniqueness. Our experience is that architectural visualizers treat all projects, or protos if you will, the same way. Add too many spices and it all tastes the same. Natural visualization means using the naturally inherent qualities of architecture and sites to express distinctness to avoid the typical." This is an example of one of Mir's video animations of Zaha Hadid's project. As you can see, the video shows a rendering of the Institute as an animated film. This offers the viewer more insight into the project. Another new tool used today is CGI. A firm known as Pixels uses this technology. This technology can make highly realistic images as good as photography, and in some cases even better. A well-known architectural visualizer is Peter Guthrie, and he believes that people are so used to computer imagery due to movies and computer games that they can read architectural renderings better than line drawings. He has worked on projects that have never actually got built in the end, and the renderings become the record of design. Another tool of new technology is virtual reality and augmented reality. This creates a realistic, immersive experience. The representation depends on multi-sensory devices that allow users to enter and explore every facet of the architectural model. Architectural drawings have changed from hand-drawn perspectives to hyperreal representations, and have changed purposes during this time to not only being made for converting to buildings, but to being standalone final products. The questions I have for you are: do the examples I use help me make my point? Am I using too many or too little examples? And should the information about the 1970s and 1980s galleries come before the early 1900s drawings to be an introduction to architectural drawings as art? Thank you.